I could barely breathe as the church doors closed behind us. My fingers were still laced with David's, my new husband, my alpha, my mate. My heart thudded in my chest as we rode back to his home, a place I had only heard about in whispers. Falcon had always said it was a mansion fit for kings, and he wasn't lying. When the car pulled up the long driveway, my breath caught. The mansion was massive, lit up like a golden dream against the night sky. 2 grand stone lions stood guarding the double doors, and vines curled along the white pillars like nature itself wanted to claim this place. I clutched David's hand tighter. This is my new life, my new home. Just hours ago, we'd been standing before the altar, promising forever. Now, here we were, husband and wife, ready to start our life together. Falcon's words echoed in my head as I stepped out of the car. Be brave, pup. A new pack can be a blessing or a trap. I shook off the thought. Tonight was about happiness, about finally belonging. The heavy doors opened, and there she was, Venessa, David's mother. Welcome, Juliya, she said warmly, her voice smooth and melodic. She glided toward me, every movement graceful, deliberate. Venessa was breathtaking. She wore a deep blue velvet dress, the fabric clinging to her curves before splitting daringly high on one thigh. Her dark, cascading hair framed a face that seemed too flawless to be real, bold eyes, a sharp, elegant nose, lips curved in a perfect smile. She didn't just look beautiful, she owned the room with her presence. For a moment, I couldn't find words. She looked far younger than I'd expected. Maybe mid-40s tops, but David was 32. That didn't add up. I pushed the thought aside and smiled. Thank you, I said softly, clutching the skirt of my simple dress. The only nice dress I owned, gifted by Falcon for today. Next to Venessa, I felt like a child playing dress-up. Venessa's smile deepened as she leaned forward and kissed the top of my head, her perfume swirling around me, sweet, intoxicating. Welcome to our family, dear, she murmured. This house is yours now. The words sent a warm shiver through me. Mine, my home. Why don't you explore a bit, she suggested. Get to know the place, I'll prepare dinner. Oh, of course, I said quickly, still overwhelmed. She turned gracefully and headed toward the kitchen, the slit of her dress swaying with each step. I exhaled, trying to take in everything. The foyer itself looked like something out of a movie, polished marble floors, massive chandelier glittering overhead, and a staircase that spiraled up like something from a fairy tale. David gave my hand a gentle squeeze, his lips curving in a proud, almost smug smile. Go on, he said, take a look around. I nodded eagerly and started down the hall. The ground floor had 3 rooms. The first 2 opened easily, guest rooms, I guessed. Both were neatly kept, with fresh sheets and lavender-scented linens. Cozy, nothing unusual. But the 3rd door was locked. I frowned and tugged at the handle again. Locked, from the outside. Oh, Venessa's voice chimed suddenly, making me jump. She appeared silently behind me like a shadow. That's just old lady stuff, she said lightly, almost too quickly. It's a mess in there, very cluttered. We'll sort it out another day. I forced a smile. Oh yeah, sure, that's fine. Her eyes softened, but there was something unreadable beneath them. She laid a perfectly manicured hand on my arm. This is your house now, Juliya, she said gently, her tone warm but final. The words should have comforted me. Instead, they sent a strange flutter through my chest. Well, Venessa said, stepping back. Dinner will be ready soon. I'll see you in a few minutes. Of course, I replied. As she glided away toward the kitchen, I noticed something odd. No other voices, no laughter, no clinking of glasses. There were no guests. At the church, a few friends and pack members had witnessed the ceremony, but that was it. I'd expected a feast, a celebration. David was wealthy. Surely he'd want to show off his bride. But the house was silent. Why? Before I could spiral into questions, David's voice broke through my thoughts. Shall we? He asked, his tone smooth, unreadable as always. I turned to him and smiled. Yes. We climbed the grand staircase together. My hand glided along the smooth railing, my heart fluttering. The staircase curved endlessly upward, like something from a dream. The second floor had 3 rooms, just like below. "That one's ours," David said, pointing to the first door. "Can I explore the others?" I asked, hesitant but curious. He chuckled softly, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "If you wish, of course." I opened the second door. A large room greeted me, filled with elegant furniture and soft golden light spilling through a massive window overlooking the backyard. And beyond that, dark forest stretching into the night. Beautiful, peaceful, but something about those woods felt watching. I closed the door and moved to the third room. It was almost identical. Neat, perfect, lifeless. Finally, I stepped into our room and gasped. It was enormous, far beyond anything I'd imagined. A massive bed draped in silk, walls adorned with intricate carvings, mirrors reflecting warm candlelight. Even the bathroom was nearly the size of my childhood cabin, complete with 2 marble bathtubs side by side. "This is incredible," I breathed. David smiled faintly, clearly pleased by my awe. "I'm glad you like it." As he moved behind me, I turned and locked the door. A sudden, playful thought struck me. "What should I wear now?" I teased, twirling slightly. David crossed to a towering wardrobe and pulled it open. My mouth fell open. Rows upon rows of dresses, nightgowns, gowns for parties I'd never been to, casual outfits I'd never dreamed of owning. Over 100 pieces easily. "Pick whatever you like," David said, his voice low, velvety. I reached out and touched a white nightdress so soft it felt like clouds. Velvet smooth, delicate, perfect. My fingers trembled slightly as I let my wedding dress slip from my shoulders. The fabric pooled around my feet. I stood there in my corset and undergarments, feeling David's gaze on me like a physical touch. Slowly, deliberately, I removed the corset and slid the silky nightdress over my body. David's jaw tightened, his eyes darkened with desire. I smirked playfully, giving him a teasing glance over my shoulder. Then I ruined his fun on purpose. "Dinner?" I asked sweetly. He let out a low growl of frustration, though a hint of a smile tugged at his lips. "Yes, of course," he said. As he unbuttoned his shirt, I caught my breath. His body was perfect. Six-pack abs, broad shoulders, arms sculpted from years at the gym. My cheeks heated as he changed into casual night clothes, moving with the easy grace of a predator. He reached for my hand again. "Let's go," he said smoothly. And just like that, we were heading downstairs to dinner, the scent of roasted meat and spices drifting through the air. I didn't know it then. But this house, this perfect, beautiful mansion, was about to become my cage. David led me down the grand staircase, our hands intertwined. The marble steps were cool beneath my bare feet, and my heart fluttered with a strange mix of excitement and unease. When we reached the dining room on the ground floor, the smell of roasted meat and spices hit me, rich and mouth-watering. A long, polished wooden table stood at the center, its surface gleaming under soft golden lights. 2 places had been set, one for me and one for David. Venessa was already there, but she'd changed clothes since earlier. Now she wore a silky nightgown that flowed like water when she moved. It was delicate and beautiful, far too luxurious for something meant to be slept in. Even like this, she looked stunning, her perfect features practically glowing in the warm light. How does she look so flawless all the time? I couldn't help but wonder. We sat down, and the 3 of us ate together. The conversation was light, a few polite questions about my upbringing, some comments about the food. Venessa's voice was soothing, melodic, like every word she spoke had been carefully chosen. But beneath that calm, something about her felt rehearsed, controlled. When the plates were finally cleared away, Venessa gave us a gracious smile and stood. "Good night, my dears," she said warmly, her hand grazing David's shoulder as she passed. "Good night," I replied automatically. She glided down the hall toward her room. I leaned slightly to peek, curious to finally see inside, but Venessa was quick. Too quick. She slipped through the doorway, and before I could catch a single glimpse, the lock clicked loudly behind her. My curiosity spiked like a flame, but I forced a polite smile as David turned to me. "Shall we go to our room?" he asked, his tone smooth and calm. "Yeah," I said softly, letting him take my hand again. We climbed the stairs in silence. The moment we entered our room and I turned the lock, David didn't wait. His hands were suddenly at my waist, his lips hot against my neck. I gasped as he kissed me, his mouth trailing upward until our lips met. My heart raced. I kissed him back, my fingers tangling in his hair, losing myself in him completely. His hands slipped to my shoulders, gently sliding the thin straps of my nightdress down. The silk pooled silently at my feet. His lips moved over my bare skin, my shoulders, my collarbone, every inch of me claimed with heat and hunger. The night was warm, our bodies tangled together in a rhythm that felt primal and deep, like we weren't two separate beings but one soul. David was stronger than I'd expected, his touch both tender and commanding. By the time nearly an hour had passed, I was breathless, utterly consumed. Finally, he collapsed beside me, wrapping me in his arms. "Are you okay?" he whispered against my hair, his breath warm. "I'm good," I murmured, still catching my breath. "You're so beautiful," he said, his voice husky with affection. I smiled sleepily, but then, to my surprise, David suddenly sat up and swung his legs over the side of the bed. "Now I have to go." My head snapped up. "Go now." "Where?" I asked, rushing to grab my clothes and slipping them back on. "Office," he said simply, pulling on his shirt. "There's important work I need to handle." "Wait, what? Can't you stay tonight?" I asked, my chest tightening. "We'd just been married. We just connected. How could he leave now?" "I'm sorry, darling," he said, his voice soft but firm. "It's really that important." Before I could ask anything else, he kissed my forehead quickly and slipped out the door, leaving me standing there with a dozen unanswered questions. I wasn't happy. In fact, a quiet storm of frustration bubbled inside me. I tried to sleep, tossing and turning in the massive bed, but my mind wouldn't rest. Questions swirled endlessly. Why was he gone so soon after our wedding night? Why had there been no big celebration, no pack gathering like Falcon always told me was tradition? Finally, I gave up. If I couldn't sleep, I could at least explore. I wrapped my nightdress tightly around me and stepped into the hall. The house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that made your ears strain for any hint of sound. The first room I entered was just beside ours, the second upstairs bedroom. It smelled faintly of lavender. I scanned the walls and dressers, my fingers brushing over frames until one photo caught my eye. It was of a boy, maybe 14, standing beside a beautiful woman who couldn't have been older than 30. The boy was unfamiliar to me, but the woman. My heart skipped. Venessa. She looked exactly the same as she did now. Not a single wrinkle, not a single sign of age. If anything, she looked even younger in the photo, like time had been standing still. A chill ran down my spine. Trying to shake it off, I set the frame back and slipped quietly downstairs to the ground floor. The first guest room seemed normal, at least, at first. But as I explored, my hand brushed against one section of the wall, and it moved. I froze. Slowly, I pressed again, harder this time. The panel shifted inward with a soft click, revealing what wasn't a wall at all but a hidden door. My breath caught in my throat, a secret passage, in this house. My curiosity outweighed my fear. I pushed it open and peered inside. Darkness greeted me, thick, almost suffocating. I stepped in carefully, feeling around for a light switch, but there was nothing. Just cold, stale air and the faint scent of dust and something metallic. Then I heard footsteps. Panicked, I slipped out of the hidden room, pressing the panels shut behind me. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure whoever was coming could hear it. I darted into the hallway, just in time to see someone moving at the far end. Not Venessa. A young woman, maybe around 30, her hair long and dark like Venessa's but glossier, silkier. She was stunning, even from behind. She walked gracefully into the bathroom without a word. My breath caught. Who is she? I almost followed, but before I could take a step, a voice echoed softly through Venessa's room. "David, is that you?" The voice was unmistakable. Venessa. Panic surged through me. I couldn't risk being caught. Moving silently, I crept back upstairs, holding my breath until I slipped inside our bedroom and locked the door behind me. I dove into bed and lay perfectly still, pretending to be asleep. My mind spun with questions. Who was that woman? Why was she here? David never said about her, neither Venessa did. What are they hiding? I turned my head slightly toward the window and froze. Down below, near the edge of the dark forest behind the mansion, I saw movement. David's pack members were emerging from the trees. Each one carried something in their hands, strips of leather, tattered and dirty. They handed them to David, who stood by a waiting truck. He loaded each piece carefully, methodically. When the truck was full, it rumbled away into the night. David turned toward the house. I quickly rolled over, shutting my eyes tight. His footsteps echoed through the hall, slow and deliberate. Then they stopped. My heart pounded. Why did he stop? Where did he go? A minute later, the door opened quietly. David slipped inside. I kept my breathing steady, feigning sleep. The mattress dipped as he lay beside me. His warmth enveloped me, but I stayed perfectly still until, eventually, exhaustion dragged me under. Morning light filtered through the curtains when I woke. David was already up, buttoning his shirt. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said warmly, leaning down to kiss me. "Good morning," I replied, kissing him back. "Did you sleep well last night? You were late coming in," I said carefully, watching his expression. "Not much," he admitted with a small laugh, "but enough to start the day. Last night I was collecting leather pieces that my employees and pack members recovered from destroyed goods, just part of the business." Relief washed over me, so that's all it was. For a moment last night, I'd feared something darker, more sinister, but this explanation made sense. Still, the image of that mysterious young woman haunted me. David kissed my forehead and left for work, his cologne lingering in the air. I headed downstairs and found Venessa sitting elegantly at the dining table, now dressed in a stunning black dress. Even in morning colors, she looked flawless. "Couldn't sleep?" Venessa asked casually, her gaze sharp. "I slept well," I said quickly, smiling. Venessa's lips curved slightly. "No, you didn't." Her certainty sent a cold chill through me. I swallowed hard, wondering if she somehow knew I'd been roaming the house last night. Venessa turned her head toward the chef. "Bring us breakfast." We ate together quietly, the clinking of silverware filling the room. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "So, it's just you and David, as in family?" Venessa's expression softened. "Yes, darling, just the two of us. And now you're here, which makes us three a lovely family." Something about the way she said it felt off, too polished, too perfect. I pressed gently. "Do you have a daughter?" Venessa paused. Then with a sigh she said, "Oh, my dear, I had 3 children, David, Wilson, and Sophie. But," she looked down, her voice softening with practiced sorrow, "a car accident took Wilson and Sophie from me. They're in heaven now." My blood ran cold. Wilson and Sophie were dead. So who had I seen last night? I forced a sympathetic expression, hiding the terror clawing at my chest. "I'm so sorry for your loss," I whispered. But inside, my mind screamed. If Sophie is dead, was that her spirit in the bathroom? Before I could finish my breakfast, Venessa's smooth voice broke through my thoughts. "Why don't you take a little tour of the city today? See the sights. It'll help you feel at home." "Yeah, of course," I said, my voice shaky. I finished eating and took a sip of water. It tasted different. Too good, too smooth, almost unnaturally perfect. A weird sensation prickled at the back of my throat, but I set the glass down quickly. "Can I use the bathroom?" I asked, pointing toward the one on the ground floor, the same bathroom where I'd seen that mysterious woman enter last night. Venessa smiled pleasantly. "Of course." I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The bathroom was spotless. No sign of anyone, Nothing, except a towel draped neatly over the counter. I picked it up and noticed a single black hair clinging to the fabric. Dark, silky, unmistakably feminine. I wrapped the hair carefully and tucked it away. A clue, proof I hadn't imagined what I'd seen, as the color of the hair in towel was slight different from Venessa's. As I slipped quietly back upstairs to my room, one thought burned in my mind. Who was she, and what was really happening in this house? My gaze drifted to the wardrobe where I had hidden the black strand of hair I'd found in the bathroom. Quietly, I unlocked the small compartment at the bottom of the wardrobe and tucked it inside, making sure it was hidden beneath my folded clothes. My chest tightened as I closed it. No one can know I have this. Not yet. I decided I couldn't stay cooped up in the house another minute. My curiosity was gnawing at me like a restless itch. I needed to see what was in those woods. Just a little walk, nothing too far. As I descended the stairs, my sandals whispering against the polished marble, I spotted Venessa at the far end of the hall. She was gliding toward her bedroom, her movements elegant as always. "See you," I said casually, trying to sound normal. Venessa turned her head and gave me one of her perfect smiles. "Of course, darling." As she stepped into her room, she quickly swung the door shut and locked it, just like always. But this time, right before it closed, I saw something. For a fraction of a second, my heart stuttered. The huge bed inside her room was visible just enough for me to notice dark red stains across the pristine white sheets. Blood. Or something else. The door clicked, cutting off my view. I blinked hard, trying to convince myself it wasn't what I thought. Maybe wine, maybe juice, maybe anything but blood. Shoving the unease aside, I slipped out the back door and stepped into the backyard. Edge of the forest loomed ahead, a tangled wall of green and shadow. I hesitated at the tree line, listening. Nothing but the distant rustle of leaves. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The forest swallowed me almost instantly. I stayed close to the edge at first, scanning carefully. That's when I spotted it, a small scrap of leather, lying half buried in the dirt. I crouched, picking it up. It didn't feel like old, discarded material from David's business. It was warm, damp, almost fresh. I moved deeper, my sandals crunching softly against twigs and leaves. Another piece of leather lay a few feet away, jagged as though it had been torn rather than cut. My breath quickened. Then I saw it. A single, severed finger lying in the grass. "Oh my God," I whispered, stumbling back a step. My stomach lurched violently. Why only a finger? Where was the rest? Panic clawed at my chest, but I forced myself to keep moving, deeper into the trees. I needed to know what the hell was happening here. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Everywhere trees, bushes, rocks, splashes of red liquid stained the surfaces. Drops, smears, trails. It wasn't just a small wound, it looked like an entire forest floor had been soaked. My throat closed up. This wasn't some minor hunting accident. This was evil. I searched desperately for some sign, some clue, but there was no body, no footprints, nothing to explain the lone finger or the carnage around me. Just endless red stains and silence that felt suffocating. I realized that morning was arriving. The sun had risen, blazing. Its light only made the scene look more grotesque. Finally, trembling, I turned back. My legs felt like lead as I retraced my steps through the forest. When I reached the backyard and opened the mansion's back door, Venessa was there. Waiting. She stood perfectly still in the hall, her flawless face serene, though her sharp eyes seemed to pierce through me. "You were exploring the forest?" she asked lightly, though there was a strange edge beneath her smooth tone. "Yeah," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "It's beautiful out there." Venessa's smile deepened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, but you must be careful. There are wolves inside those woods, and after about a mile our territory ends. Another alpha controls the land beyond that." She stepped closer, her perfume wrapping around me like a net. "People can't go there, especially after evening. Do you understand?" I nodded. "Okay." "Good," she said softly. We moved to the dining room, where lunch was already prepared. The food was delicious, but my stomach churned with unease. Still, I forced myself to eat, pretending everything was perfectly normal. When I pushed back my chair to go upstairs, the front doors opened, and David stepped inside. Relief and excitement flooded me. "David!" I exclaimed, hurrying to him. I kissed him, and he kissed me back, his lips warm, his hands resting possessively at my waist. Together, we went upstairs to our room. "Did you have lunch?" David asked, his voice soft and smooth. "Yes, did you?" I asked, studying his face. "Yes, in the office," he said. Without another word, he leaned in and captured my lips with his own, almost biting them in his intensity. Heat flared through me, my pulse racing. I kissed him back hungrily, losing myself in his scent, his strength. Then, with a mischievous grin, I pushed him down onto the bed and climbed on top of him. Clothes fell away, our bodies tangled, moving together in perfect rhythm. When it was over, David brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Missed me?" he asked, his tone teasing. "Very much," I whispered, smiling up at him. He kissed me one last time, before standing and reaching for his clothes. "See you in the evening," he said casually. "You're going?" I asked, trying not to sound disappointed. "I'll come soon," he promised, buttoning his shirt. I nodded, though my heart sank as he left. He's so busy, always so busy. Once he was gone, I decided to see what Venessa was up to. I slipped quietly down the hall and peeked into the main area. Venessa wasn't in sight. A quick glance at her door showed it was locked from the inside, as always. I turned and headed for the secret room, the one hidden behind the false wall. My heart pounded as I pressed my hands against the panel. Nothing. I pushed harder, still nothing. That's when I noticed it, a tiny latch, locked from the inside. My pulse quickened. That meant someone was in there right now, or there was another door on the other side. Backing away silently, I returned to my room, frustration bubbling in my chest. The walls felt like they were closing in. Every tick of the clock seemed louder, each minute stretching into an eternity. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I went downstairs and knocked on Venessa's door. Silence, no response. I waited a moment, then knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. Sighing, I trudged back to my room, packing restlessly until dinner. Dinner that night was a lavish spread, but Venessa wasn't there. I frowned, glancing around the empty table. "Where is Venessa?" I asked the chef. The chef bowed slightly. "Madam isn't feeling well today. She had her dinner in her room." I forced a polite smile. "Oh, I see." After finishing my meal, I tried Venessa's door again, knocking lightly. Still no answer. Something about that silence sent a shiver crawling up my spine. Determined, I slipped outside into the cool night air. The mansion's walls loomed tall and shadowed as I circled around to the side of the house, stopping beneath Venessa's window. The curtains were drawn tight. No light leaked through. With no way to see inside, I returned reluctantly to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed, chewing my lip, then picked up my phone and tried calling David. No answer, straight to voicemail. Frustration welled up in my chest. Then I heard them. Whispers. I rushed to the window and peered out. David's pack members were emerging from the forest again, carrying pieces of leather just like before. But this time, there was no David among them. They loaded the pieces into the waiting truck. I squinted, my breath catching. One of the men's shirts was stained red. Dark, wet stains splashed across the fabric. My pulse pounded. That same man, instead of leaving with the others, turned and walked back into the forest while the rest drove away. Without thinking, I slipped out of the house, careful to stay silent. The night air was sharp against my skin as I followed at a distance, my sandals crunching softly on the forest floor. The deeper I went, the stronger the metallic scent became. Fresh red stains marked the ground, thicker now, almost glowing under the moonlight. Then I heard footsteps. Panic surged through me. I dove behind a massive tree, holding my breath. Peeking around the trunk, I saw the man with the stained shirt just a few feet away. He wasn't carrying leather now. Instead, he was changing his shirt, peeling off the ruined, stained fabric and tossing it to the ground. His movements were quick, nervous. Once he was dressed, he left the forest, walking briskly toward the clearing. I watched in stunned silence as he burned the shirt in a small, hastily built fire before stomping out the flames. Heart pounding, I crept backward, keeping to the shadows. As soon as the man disappeared, I hurried back toward the mansion, every nerve screaming. When I reached the front steps, I paused, glancing over my shoulder at the dark forest behind me. The night seemed to hold its breath. Something terrible was happening out there, something that wasn't just about leather. The heavy front door creaked softly, without making any sound as I stepped into the hall, my heart still racing from what I'd seen in the forest. That's when I froze. A young man, maybe 21 or so, was walking ahead of me, moving toward one of the guest rooms down the hall. His back was to me, his dark hair falling neatly at his shoulders. My blood ran cold. W. Wilson, I whispered under my breath. David's younger brother. But that couldn't be right. Wilson had died years ago. Venessa herself had told me about the accident. Was I seeing a ghost, his spirit? My breath came in shallow bursts as I crept silently after him. Each step felt impossibly loud against the polished floor. My fingers trembled as I reached out, just in case he turned around. The young man slipped into the guest room without looking back. I rushed forward. The room was empty. I gasped, stumbling backward. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. There was nowhere for him to hide. No open window, just perfectly made sheets and a stillness that felt unnatural. A weird feeling slid through me, raising goosebumps on my skin. I spun and hurried to our bedroom, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. David still wasn't home. The mansion felt too big, too silent. My pulse wouldn't settle as I slipped beneath the blankets, curling into myself. It has to be my imagination, I told myself. But my gut screamed it was. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was streaming through the windows. I blinked at the clock on the nightstand. 10 a.m. What the hell? I mumbled, sitting up. I never slept this late. Why did I sleep so much? Shaking off the unease, I took a quick bath and changed into a fresh dress. My stomach rumbled as I headed downstairs. The hall was quiet, too quiet. The only person I saw was the chef bustling in the kitchen. "Hey," I said, stepping inside. "Are there any other staff members here?" The chef shook his head, avoiding my eyes. "No, ma'am, just me." Just him, in a house this massive, that didn't make sense. Frowning, I asked casually, "Did David come home last night?" For a second, the chef froze. His shoulders stiffened, and I caught the flicker of tension on his face. Then he plastered on a forced smile. "Yes, ma'am. He came in very late and left early for the office." He was lying, I knew it. His voice trembled, just enough to give him away. But I didn't call him out. Not yet. Instead, I asked for breakfast, and he quickly served me a plate. I ate quietly, my mind spinning. Something wasn't right. Afterward, I went upstairs to change into something more casual and decided to take a walk around the city. Maybe some fresh air would clear my head. The city was lively, bustling with markets, cafes, and colorful streets. I wandered everywhere, deliberately covering every corner. For a few hours, I almost felt normal again. But as the sun dipped lower, dread began creeping back into my chest. I headed home, my steps quickening. When I opened the front door, David was standing there. Relief and happiness surged through me. "David," I cried, rushing forward to hug him tightly. "You're too busy lately." He kissed my forehead, his arms wrapping around me. "I know, dear." I tilted my face up to him. "Can't we just get away for a couple of days? A short trip, just us?" His eyes softened. "Of course." Joy bubbled inside me. Finally, just us, away from all the strangeness of this place. We sat together, planning out the trip. David suggested a nearby beach, quiet and secluded. The idea thrilled me. I couldn't stop smiling, already imagining the salty air and waves. But when Venessa overheard our plans, her reaction was off. She wasn't angry, exactly, but concerned, her voice laced with something sharper. "I need David here," she said firmly. "My health has been fragile lately. I can't be left alone." David's jaw tightened, but he didn't back down. "It'll only be for 2 days, Mother. You'll be fine." Venessa's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. If you say so." The tension was palpable, but in the end, David agreed to the trip anyway. That night at dinner, David and I talked excitedly about the beach while Venessa remained oddly quiet, picking at her food. I forced myself to focus on David, pushing aside the unease. After dinner, we went upstairs. The second our bedroom door closed, David didn't say a word. He just grabbed me, kissing me hard as his hands slid down my back. In one smooth motion, he stripped off my dress and laid me down on the bed. For almost 2 hours, we made love. Passionate, consuming, leaving me breathless and trembling. When it finally ended, David held me close, his lips brushing my ear. "We're leaving in the morning," he murmured. I smiled, kissing him. "I can't wait." Wrapped in his arms, I drifted off. When I opened my eyes again, something felt wrong. The light outside wasn't morning, it was evening. I shot upright. "What the—" David was gone. I checked my phone, 6:15 p.m. My stomach twisted. We were supposed to leave in the morning. How did I sleep this long? Confused and unsettled, I showered and dressed quickly before heading downstairs. Venessa sat gracefully on the sofa, looking as serene as ever. Before I could speak, she tilted her head, her voice calm but cutting. "Why didn't you wake up earlier, darling? Are you taking sleeping medicine?" I blinked. "Of course not. I can't believe I slept until evening." "Where, David?" Venessa's eyes glittered. "He tried to wake you many times, but you didn't respond. You seemed very tired." I frowned. That doesn't sound right. "When will he be back?" "Within an hour," she said smoothly. "Okay," I replied, forcing a polite smile. As I turned, I noticed her bedroom door was slightly ajar. My heart pounded. I pretended to be heading for the bathroom, but angled my gaze through the gap. At first, everything looked normal. The bed was neatly made, the room immaculate. But then, something caught my eye. On the far side of the room, partially hidden by the drapes, was a small, fleshy object. It looked disturbingly like a body part, maybe an organ. Human or animal, I couldn't tell. A rush of nausea hit me. I quickly ducked into the bathroom, gripping the sink. What is wrong with her? What is going on in this house? When I stepped back out, the door to Venessa's room was locked tight, as if it had never been open. Heart pounding, I retreated to my own room and dialed David. This time, he answered immediately. "Hey, when are you coming back?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. "I'm on the way," he replied smoothly. "What about our trip?" "You didn't wake up," he said, almost teasing. "But don't worry, we'll go tomorrow morning." Relief and frustration warred inside me. "Love you," I said softly and hung up. Hunger gnawed at me, so I headed downstairs for lunch. The food was delicious, as always, though something about it tasted different. Later, I curled up on the bed to rest for just a few minutes. When I opened my eyes again, it was dark outside. I yawned and reached for my phone. And froze. The date had changed. "What the hell?" I whispered. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I hadn't just slept through the night. I'd been asleep for more than 24 hours. My mind raced. How is this even possible? Could there be something in the food, some kind of sedative? I decided right then, no more eating anything from this house. From now on, I'd eat outside whenever possible. I needed to stay alert to figure out what was really happening here. I waited anxiously for David, packing the room. Finally, he came home. Relief swept over me as he smiled and kissed me. After dinner, we went upstairs. Just like before, there were no long conversations, no questions. Only intense, almost desperate lovemaking. I couldn't help but notice how David seemed to be talking less and less each day, while his physical desire for me only grew stronger. Afterward, lying tangled in the sheets, I turned to him. "I'm not sleeping tonight," I declared firmly. He chuckled softly. "Don't worry, I'll make sure you wake up in the morning." But I wasn't taking any chances. I lay in bed, my eyes wide open, heart pounding, forcing myself to stay awake. And this time, I didn't sleep at all. Morning sunlight filtered softly through the curtains as I blinked awake. I sat up slowly, remembering my decision to stay awake all night. My body was not buzzing with exhaustion, but I had managed to keep myself from slipping into that strange, heavy sleep again, so yes, little bit tired. David stirred beside me, his arms sliding lazily across my waist. His warm skin brushed mine, and for a moment, everything felt almost normal. "David," I said softly, shaking his shoulder. "It's morning. We need to get ready for the trip, remember?" He groaned but smiled at me, his perfect dimples flashing. "Right, the beach." I didn't need to be told twice. I quickly dressed, excitement thrumming in my chest. After days of confusion, terror, and unanswered questions, this little getaway felt like an escape, a chance to breathe again. The trip was perfect. The salty breeze of the ocean kissed my face as David and I walked hand in hand along the golden sand. The waves lapped at our ankles, cool and refreshing. For hours, we talked, laughed, and played like carefree lovers. But I noticed one thing, that David's attention was there in the house. He was with me, but partially he was in his house. Or maybe I was thinking much. Later, we found a club near the beach where music pulsed through the night. David twirled me beneath the neon lights, his hands strong and sure at my waist. We danced like we were the only two people in the world, his dark, intense eyes never leaving mine. For a few blissful hours, I forgot about Venessa's locked doors, the mysterious spirits, and the bloody forest. That night, David and I made love in a hotel room overlooking the sea. It was passionate, wild, the kind of intimacy that made me ache in my chest. When we returned home the next evening, Venessa was waiting. The second David stepped through the door, Venessa's face lit up with a joy that felt too sharp, too intense. She rushed to embrace him, ignoring me entirely, like a child getting her toy back. And that's when I noticed it. Her beauty, that flawless ethereal glow, seemed to have faded slightly. The lines around her eyes were just a little deeper. Her cheeks were less full, her lips less vibrant. What happened to her in just 2 days? Before I could look closer, Venessa slipped away to her room, locking the door as always. My unease deepened. We stepped into our room. David and I were alone in our room. I finally told him everything I'd been holding back. "David, there's something you need to know," I said, clutching his hand. His brow furrowed. "What is it, Juliya?" I swallowed hard. I've seen things in this house. A young woman near the bathroom and a young man in the hall. They vanished right in front of me. I think they're spirits, Wilson and Sophie. David looked confused. He asked, "Wilson and Sophie?" Then I said, "Your siblings." At their names, David stiffened. "My siblings?" he asked, voice tight. "Yes," I said quickly. "Venessa told me about them, that they died in a car accident years ago." His expression flickered, first confused, then carefully neutral. "Yes, of course. They passed long ago, which means you must be hallucinating, seeing things that aren't there." I stared at him, stunned. He was lying. I could feel it in my bones. But I didn't press him about Wilson and Sophie. Instead, I brought up the other secret. "I also found a door," I said carefully. "A hidden door inside the wall. What's behind it?" David's dark eyes turned stormy, his jaw tightening. "It's nothing, just old junk. Can I see it, please, just to explore?" "No," his voice was sharp now. "Forget about it, Juliya." David didn't even look at me. And with that, he stood abruptly and left the room, slamming the door behind him. I sat there. David was hiding something big. I waited at the window, watching for the pack members. My instincts told me that if I wanted answers, I needed to see for myself what David and his men were doing in the forest. Finally, I spotted movement, dark figures emerging from the trees. They were entering the forest, which means they were going to collect. This was the best time. I slipped silently out of the house and crouched low, keeping to the shadows as I followed them. They moved deeper and deeper into the woods, far past the point David had told me was the border of another territory. They shouldn't be here, I thought, a chill creeping down my spine. I crept after them, my heart hammering loud. That's when I saw it. The pack members weren't collecting scraps of leather from old goods like David claimed. They were hunting werewolves from the neighboring territory. I froze as one of the men ripped the skin from a fallen werewolf, red liquids soaking the ground. The scent of it hit me like a punch. Horror crashed over me. My hand flew to my mouth, muffling my scream. This is evil. This is war. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, branches whipping at my face as I tore back through the forest. By the time I reached the mansion, my lungs burned. I slipped inside quietly, my body trembling. Venessa was asleep in her locked room. From my window, I watched as the men returned, loading the freshly skinned pelts into a truck before driving away into the night. And in that moment, everything became clear. David's entire business empire wasn't built on luxury leather goods. It was built on the hunting of other werewolves. But how had no one discovered this? How had David remained untouchable? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. When morning came, I called David. No answer. My eyes drifted to the breakfast tray, left outside my door. I hadn't eaten anything from this house since my realization about the food. And now I knew for certain. Since I'd stopped eating it, I hadn't fallen into those strange, endless sleeps. Whatever was in the food had been drugging me. Nothing in this house was safe. Nothing. I slipped out and went to a nearby cafe, my hands still shaking as I sipped coffee and nibbled on a warm croissant. As I sat there, trying to calm myself, I noticed a young man at a corner table. He was strikingly handsome, with broad shoulders and an innocent, open face that made him look younger than his 22 or 23 years. His clothes were simple, clearly not from the city, and there was a raw, unpolished charm about him. Every woman in the cafe was sneaking glances at him. But there was something in his eyes, a softness, a sincerity that caught my attention. But I returned home, of course. I am married. When David returned home, that same young man walked in with him. "Juliya," David said, smiling faintly, "this is Raven, my cousin." I blinked, stunned. It was him, the stranger from the cafe. Raven's face lit up. "So you're Juliya. I've heard so much about you." He pulled me into a warm hug, his sincerity immediately disarming me. Raven came from a small village. David explained. "He's here to work with me in the business." Raven grinned, and to see how my fancy big city cousin lives. David turned to me. "Now you won't be alone during the day. You'll have company." Relief flooded me. Thank God. David didn't linger. After a quick meal, he left for the office, leaving me and Raven alone with terrifying Venessa. Raven was given the second bedroom on the first floor, with that mysterious hidden door. I got it. They gave that room to Raven so that I couldn't go there, but instead I was looking forward to enter Raven's room. As soon as I could, I slipped into his room and closed the door behind me. "Raven," I whispered urgently, "how much do you know about David's business?" He looked startled by my tone. "Not much," he admitted. "Just that he makes really good leather goods, that's it. This is my first time in the city after being an adult." His wide-eyed honesty was undeniable. He truly didn't know anything about the darkness lurking beneath the surface. "Right," I said, swallowing my disappointment. "I was just curious." I said goodbye and went to my room. Over the next few days, Raven and I grew close. He was a natural storyteller, always ready with tales of his childhood in the village, mischievous pranks, near-death scrapes, and laugh-out-loud misadventures. Sometimes, I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. He had a goofy sense of humor that reminded me of what normal felt like. We'd go to the nearby cafe together, sipping coffee and teasing each other about our different upbringings. Sometimes we'd just take long walks through the city, talking about everything and nothing. For the first time since moving into David's mansion, I didn't feel completely alone. Raven's presence was a bright light in the darkness, a reminder that not everyone in this world was hiding terrible secrets. Even though he worked at David's office, his hours were strangely short, from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., just 4 hours each night. But whenever he returned, he'd always find me, eager to talk and laugh before breakfast. I couldn't help but notice the difference between Raven and David. David's touch was passionate, consuming, but his words were few. Raven, on the other hand, filled the silence with laughter and warmth. And slowly, carefully, a fragile trust began to grow between us. A trust that felt like it might just save me. Raven and I sat in the backyard under the fading glow of twilight, the warm summer air humming with crickets. The sprawling forest loomed in the distance like a dark wall, but for now, we tried to forget it. So, Raven said, leaning back on the bench with a mischievous grin, back in my village, there was this goat named Chappie. That little guy was pure evil. I laughed so hard I almost choked. A goat, seriously. Don't laugh, Raven said, pointing at me, feigning offense. This goat knew how to open doors. Doors, Juliya. He once broke into my uncle's house, ate half a pillow, and then rammed my cousin so hard the poor kid didn't stop crying for 2 hours. I clutched my stomach, tears streaming down my cheeks. Oh my God, stop. My sides hurt. Raven grinned, clearly proud of himself. And you should have seen my face when Chappie stole my lunch right out of my hands. I swore vengeance, but the goat always won. We both dissolved into uncontrollable laughter, the kind of laughter that felt like an anchor in a storm. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about blood-stained forests or locked doors. Later, we moved up to Raven's room. He sprawled across his bed dramatically while I sat cross-legged on the floor, shaking my head. You seriously let a goat bully you your entire childhood, I teased, throwing a pillow at him. He caught it midair. Hey, don't underestimate Chappie. That demon had horns and no mercy. We laughed again, and for a while, everything felt light and simple. But when I finally returned to my room, the laughter faded. The quiet pressed in on me like a heavy blanket. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, and found myself thinking about Raven. Not romantically, not exactly. It was more about how safe he made me feel, how he'd filled the lonely silence in this house with his laughter. Still, a tiny flicker of warmth spread through me as I remembered his goofy grin. As days passed, I began to notice something unsettling. Ever since Raven had arrived, David's visits home became even rarer. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was a busy man. But soon, I realized I hadn't seen him in days. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. So when David finally returned one evening, I didn't greet him with a hug. Instead, I stood with my arms crossed, my voice sharp. David, we need to talk. He glanced at me, clearly tired, clearly distracted. About what? About the fact that you're never here, I snapped. I barely see you anymore, David. You're always at work or somewhere. You don't even care how lonely it gets here. His jaw tightened. You knew what my work was like before you married me. This isn't about work, I said, my voice breaking. It's about us. You don't even try anymore. David's eyes darkened, his temper flaring. Maybe if you weren't constantly complaining, Juliya. Complaining, I shot back, furious. I'm begging for a little of your time. He turned on his heel. I don't have time for this, he growled and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the walls trembled. Tears burned my eyes as I retreated to my room. I barely had time to collapse on the bed before I heard a soft knock. The door creaked open, and Raven stepped inside, his expression full of concern. "Hey," he said gently, crossing the room in 2 strides. Without hesitation, he wrapped me in a comforting hug. "Don't worry," Raven murmured against my hair. "I'll talk to him. He shouldn't treat you like this." I clung to him, breathing in his warm, earthy scent. "Thank you. I feel so alone sometimes." "You're not alone," he said firmly, pulling back to look me in the eye. "Not while I'm here." After a long pause, I told him everything. About the young woman and the young man I'd seen wandering the hallways. "They weren't just visitors," I whispered. "I think they are spirits, Sophie and Wilson, who died years ago." Raven's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, what? A young woman, a young man, here?" "Yes," I said urgently. "You've never seen them." Raven shook his head slowly. "No, Julia, I've never seen anyone like that in this house." "Then watch tonight," I insisted, grabbing his hand. "Please, stay up with me, you'll see." His gaze softened. "All right, let's see." We spent hours hiding near the bathroom, crouched behind a decorative screen. At first, it was almost fun, like kids sneaking cookies at midnight. But as time dragged on and nothing happened, Raven started to get restless. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered, rubbing his eyes. "Because all I'm seeing is a very boring hallway." "They'll show," I whispered back, though doubt gnawed at me. "They have to." Raven sighed dramatically. "If a ghost doesn't show up in the next 5 minutes, I'm demanding snacks." I stifled a laugh, even as my nerves frayed. Finally, just as we were about to give up, we heard it, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. My breath caught. Raven's hand tightened around mine. We peeked around the corner and saw her. A beautiful young woman, ethereal and glowing faintly in the dim light, walking gracefully down the hall. My heart lurched. "Sophie." "Oh my God," Raven breathed. "She's real." Before I could stop him, he surged forward. "I'm going to ask her who she is." "No, Raven," I hissed, grabbing his arm. "You don't understand, she's a spirit. Sophie and Wilson, they died years ago, David's siblings." Raven froze, turning to me, his face pale. "David never had any siblings." My blood ran cold. "What?" Raven's voice was firm, certain. "I grew up with David, at least in my childhood, Julia. If he had siblings, I would know. But he doesn't." I stared at him, stunned, my mind reeling. Back in Raven's room, we sat facing each other, the tension crackling like a live wire. "Think about it," Raven said, leaning forward. "Why would David lie about having siblings? And why would you see that?" I shook my head. "I don't know, none of this makes sense." "There's more," Raven said quietly. "Something I realized tonight." "What is it?" "Aunt Venessa," he said, his voice lowering. "When I was a kid, she looked different." "Different how?" I asked, confused. "Like younger." "No, not younger." He ran a hand through his hair. "Her face, the structure of it, it's almost the same, but not exactly. Like someone wearing a perfect mask." A chill crawled down my spine. "So what are you saying?" "I don't know yet," Raven admitted. "But there's something wrong with her, Julia, something very wrong." I swallowed hard, then told him about the secret door hidden in the wall. Without hesitation, Raven followed me to it. "This is it," I whispered, pushing on the panel. It shifted slightly but wouldn't open. "See, it's locked from the inside." Raven crouched, examining it closely. "You're right, it's definitely a door." He straightened, determination flashing in his eyes. "They locked it, but don't worry, Julia, I'll find the key." We returned to his room, and Raven hesitated, looking uneasy. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. I gave a weak laugh. "Don't wait until Christmas, spill it now." He smiled faintly, but then turned serious. "At first I thought I was imagining it, but now I'm sure. David doesn't like me." "What?" I asked, shocked. "Why would he not like you?" "Because he didn't want me here," Raven said flatly. "My parents pressured him to take me in. I think he wants me to go back home." That doesn't make sense, I said, frowning. Why? I don't know, but I can feel it. He's trying to push me out. I took a deep breath. Raven, there's something else you need to know. And then I told him everything. About the pack members hunting werewolves from another territory. About the bloody skins being hauled back under the cover of night. Raven stared at me, stunned. You're saying David's men are destroying werewolves for their skins? Yes, I whispered. That's what his leather business really is. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he nodded, his jaw tight. I believe you, he said finally, because everything you've told me so far has been true. The truth hung between us like a storm cloud, heavy and waiting to break. And deep down, I knew the worst was yet to come. Raven's gaze locked with mine, a silent electricity sparking between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His eyes, warm and full of concern, felt like they were looking straight into me, peeling back every layer I'd tried so hard to keep guarded. I swallowed, my throat dry. Why is it so hard to breathe? Raven tilted his head slightly. Juliya, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. What are you thinking right now? My lips parted, but no words came out at first. I leaned closer, my face inches from his. We need to plan, I finally managed, my voice trembling. If we're going to survive this, we have to plan every move carefully. Raven gave a small nod. Of course, we'll figure it out together. Something inside me snapped. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I closed the space between us and kissed him. It wasn't soft or careful. It was desperate, fiery, like my fear, loneliness, and longing had built up into a single reckless act. My lips crashed against his, and for a split second, Raven didn't move. Then, like ice water poured over fire, he shoved me back, his hands gripping my shoulders. What are you doing? His voice was sharp, almost panicked. Have you lost your mind? I'm your husband's cousin. Reality came crashing down around me. Shame burned in my chest like acid. I'm so sorry, I stammered, backing away. I don't know what came over me, I completely lost my mind. Raven turned away, running a hand through his hair, clearly trying to control his emotions. We'll talk about this in the morning. Please, Juliya, just go. My stomach twisted painfully. His words cut deeper than I expected. Feeling both embarrassed and rejected, I whispered, "Good night," but Raven didn't respond. I left his room with my head down and my heart pounding. As I shut my own bedroom door, the weight of my mistake crushed me. Just a few hours ago, Raven and I had been laughing like best friends, like allies. Now I'd crossed a line that could destroy everything, our friendship, our trust, our entire fragile alliance. I sat on my bed, hugging my knees, terrified that tomorrow he might treat me differently. Or worse, not at all. The silence of the house was broken by a distant, eerie sound. Rustle, snap, crunch. I froze and ran to the window, peering out into the darkness. David was out there, moving silently toward the forest like a shadow slipping into another world. My pulse quickened. Where is he going this late? Suddenly, my door burst open. I gasped and spun around to find Raven standing there, his eyes sharp and urgent, his earlier coldness forgotten. This is it, he said, breathless. The perfect moment. If we tell the Alpha from the next territory what David's pack has been doing, maybe, just maybe, we can stop all of this. I nodded quickly, clinging to the hope in his words. You're right, let's go now. Without thinking, I grabbed his hand. The warmth of his palm sent a strange jolt through me, and I quickly let go, blushing. Sorry, I muttered. Raven gave me a small, distracted smile. Come on. We crept downstairs together, hearts pounding, but the moment we reached the bottom step, we froze. Venessa was waiting for us. She stood in the center of the hall like a nightmare come to life, wearing a long black cloak over a gothic witch dress. Her nails were long and razor-sharp, glinting like knives in the dim light. Her face wasn't entirely human anymore. Her nose had elongated, her cheekbones sharper, her mouth curling in a sinister grin. Raven's breath caught. My legs went weak. Venessa's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "You thought it would be that simple," she hissed, her tone both mocking and terrifying. Then she laughed, a deep, guttural sound that raised goosebumps on my skin. Before either of us could react, Venessa raised her arms high. Dark energy swirled around her fingertips, black smoke curling like living serpents. "No!" I screamed, grabbing Raven's arm, but it was too late. The magic shot forward, and solid bars of steel materialized around us in an instant, forming a cage so tight we could barely move. Raven shook the bars, his face pale. "It's solid," he said in disbelief. "We're trapped." Venessa's grin widened. "Oh, you'll stay right there." With a flick of her wrist, the cage floated off the floor and slammed down inside her room. As soon as we were inside, my stomach turned. The smell hit me first, metallic and sour, like rust and decay. Then I saw them. Scattered across the floor and piled on a table were hearts. Actual, bloody hearts, or what was left of them. I gagged, choking back bile. "Oh my God." Raven's eyes went wide. "Juliya, those are leftover pieces," Venessa said almost casually, admiring her collection like an artist with a gallery. "Pieces of the foolish creatures who dared to challenge me." Who are you?" I stammered, my voice trembling. Venessa's smile sharpened into something monstrous. "I'm not David's mother, you pathetic little fool. I am far, far older than that." Raven's hands curled into fists. "Then, where is David's real mother?" Venessa's eyes gleamed. "Gone. I destroyed her. And then I manipulated David, molded him into exactly what I needed. He brings me what I desire, and in return, I give him what he desires, power and wealth." I shook my head, horror dawning. "What do you ask from him?" Venessa's laughter filled the room. "Hundreds of hearts, strong, male werewolves from neighboring territories. Each night, David delivers me a new heart, torn fresh from the body of a slain wolf." My entire body went cold. "The hearts," I whispered, my voice breaking, "they're what keep you young." Venessa's lips curled into a pleased smile. "Yes, every heart I consume feeds my beauty, my youth, my strength. That is why I look so perfect." And suddenly, it all made sense. The strange red stains. David's late-night trips. The mysterious skins. The puzzle pieces clicked together, forming a picture too horrifying to bear. Venessa leaned close to the cage, her eyes glowing faintly red. "If either of you dares tell David the truth about me," she hissed, "I will destroy you both before you can utter a single word." Julia's heart hammered against her ribs. We understand," I stammered, lowering my gaze. "We won't say anything." Beside me, Raven nodded stiffly, though his jaw was tight with barely contained fury. Venessa laughed, satisfied, and glided out of the room, leaving us surrounded by the stench of death and iron bars. The moment she was gone, Raven crouched beside me, whispering urgently, "There's something I didn't tell you earlier." I turned to him, panicked. "What?" He exhaled shakily. "You know my work schedule, right? From 11 at night until 3 in the morning." "Yes," I said, confused. "That's when you're in the forest." "Exactly, but David never told me why. I thought it was just some strange duty. Now I get it." His eyes burned with anger. "If anyone sees me in that forest at night, they'll assume I'm the one hunting and destroying those werewolves." My stomach dropped. "Oh my God, David's setting you up." Raven nodded grimly. "It's the perfect cover. If another alpha gets suspicious, they'll blame me." "Not him." I pressed my hands to my mouth, shaking. "We have to tell David what Venessa really is, that she destroyed his mother and has been using him all along." Raven's expression darkened. "And how do we do that without getting ourselves destroyed?" I forced myself to breathe, to think clearly despite the fear clawing at me. "First, we escape this cage. Then we find proof, something undeniable about what really happened to David's mother. Only then will he believe us." Raven nodded slowly. And if we do? Then Venessa wins, I said, my voice trembling. We scanned the room desperately, our eyes darting over the piles of hearts, the dark candles, the ancient spell books. But there were no phones, no weapons, no tools. Nothing. Only each other, and a fragile plan that was our last chance to survive. The night was suffocatingly still, the kind of quiet that pressed against your ears like a warning. Raven and I crouched inside the cold steel cage, our backs pressed against the bars, our breathing shallow as we tried to come up with a plan. Suddenly, knock, knock, knock. Both our heads snapped toward the sound. It wasn't the creak of the floorboards or the eerie whispers we'd come to expect from this cursed house. It was firm, authoritative, and coming from the main entrance. Raven's eyes widened. That's someone at the front door. My pulse spiked. Who would be here this late? Before we could speculate, we heard Venessa's sharp footsteps approaching. Her figure swept past her bedroom door, and in a blink, her monstrous features shifted away, like a mask slipping into place. Her nose shortened, her nails retracted, her eyes dimmed to their usual warm brown. When she opened the main door, she looked every bit the elegant, respectable mother-in-law I'd always known. I held my breath and strained to listen. Standing outside were two uniformed men, police officers. Their presence was a shock in this isolated world, where wolves ruled more than humans. "Good evening, ma'am," one of them said, his tone polite but clipped. "We're here on official pack business. The alpha of the neighboring territory has filed a complaint." Venessa tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Complaint? About what, officer?" The second cop stepped forward. "About repeated invasions into his territory. Witnesses claim a young man has been seen in the woods these past several nights. The alpha identified him as someone named Raven." I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Raven's face went pale beside me. Before Venessa could spin one of her usual manipulative lies, the first officer's voice hardened. "Ma'am, this is serious. We've been ordered to arrest Raven immediately and take him in for questioning. Please call him here now." Raven's fingers dug into the steel bars. "Juliya," he whispered urgently. "This is it. This is David's plan. He set me up." Venessa's jaw tightened. She clearly hadn't expected this. For once, she didn't have a neat escape route. Her options were limited. If she refused the police, they'd suspect something far worse was going on inside this house. She turned slowly, her eyes narrowing at us. Then, with a muttered spell, the bars of our cage shimmered and vanished into smoke. "Stay quiet," she hissed at me, her voice cold and deadly. I froze, my body rigid with terror, while Raven was yanked to his feet. Venessa pasted on her warmest fake smile and escorted Raven out of the room like nothing had happened. Within moments, the police were putting cuffs on him. "Wait!" I shouted, surging forward, but Venessa's glare stopped me cold. Her expression made it clear. If I made one sound, I wouldn't live to regret it. "Don't fight them, ma'am," one of the officers said over his shoulder as Raven was led out the door. "We just need to question him." The door slammed shut. The house fell into a terrible, suffocating silence. Venessa's calm mask cracked the second the police left. Her face twisted, her hands curling into claws as she whirled on me. "You stupid little fool," she hissed, her voice dropping into that guttural, inhuman tone. "This is your doing, isn't it? You and that boy." I stumbled backward until my spine hit the wall, shaking my head. "I didn't, Venessa, I swear, I didn't say anything to them." "Liar," she shrieked. "Do you have any idea what trouble this brings me? If the alpha suspects what we've been doing." She stopped abruptly, chest heaving. Her eyes were wild, like a predator on the verge of striking. Before I could answer, the front door burst open again. David strode in, his presence filling the room like a storm. His dark hair was damp with sweat, his shirt slightly rumpled, his piercing gaze moving between me and Venessa. "What's going on?" he demanded, his tone sharp. Venessa's rage, vanished behind a facade of motherly calm. "Oh, David, it was the police. They came looking for Raven." David's brows furrowed. "Why?" "They said there have been complaints," Venessa replied smoothly. "Apparently, the neighboring Alpha believes someone from our pack has been invading his territory. Witnesses saw Raven in the forest. They arrested him." To my horror, his lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. "That's good news." Raven's words echoed in my head. "David wants me gone." Then I realized that I can see them, but from outside they couldn't see through window. It was see-through only from inside, which means whenever I was in hall or dinning, Venessa always saw me, but I couldn't. But David wasn't done. His smile faded as his gaze swept the room again. "Where, Juliya?" My heart skipped a beat. Venessa didn't hesitate. She went to the forest. David's head snapped toward her. "Now, at night." "Yes," Venessa said, voice smooth and steady. "She knows, David. She knows about everything, the hunts, the hearts I consume. I overheard her and Raven plotting to expose us. They were going to tell the police." David's eyes blazed with sudden fury. "They were planning to betray us." Venessa nodded solemnly. David paced, his fists clenching. "Then before Raven speaks a single word, we have to take him back and destroy him." The cold finality in his voice sent a chill down my spine. He wasn't just talking about punishment, he meant death. Venessa's lips curled in satisfaction. "And Juliya, we'll have to destroy her too." "No," David's voice thundered through the room. "She's my wife. I love her. I won't let you harm her." Venessa's eyes narrowed, her tone mocking. "Love? You think love will save you from this? She's a liability now, David. She knows too much." David stepped closer, towering over her. "Trust me," he growled, his tone low and dangerous. "I will make her understand. I'll convince her to stay silent." Venessa's nostrils flared, and for a tense moment, it looked like she might defy him. Finally, with a sharp exhale, she muttered, "As you wish." David didn't waste another second. He turned on his heel and stormed out the front door, his powerful stride carrying him into the night. I stayed perfectly still, barely daring to breathe as Venessa stood there, glaring at the door. Inside, my mind raced. Raven was in custody, about to be framed for crimes he didn't commit. David was searching for me, completely unaware of the truth about his so-called mother. And I was alone in this house with a witch who wanted me dead. One wrong move, and everything would be over. The night stretched endlessly, heavy with silence. I sat on the cold steel floor of my cage, my knees pulled to my chest, trying to calm my trembling hands. The dim light flickered above me, throwing twisted shadows on Venessa's room walls. My mind was a storm of confusion and fear. Venessa paced back and forth near the window, her sharp nails clicking against the wooden armrest of her chair. I could tell she was as restless as I was, but for entirely different reasons. Her lips curled into a strange smirk, but there was a twitch of uncertainty there. "Venessa," I finally whispered, my throat raw from lack of water, "what are you going to do with me?" She didn't answer, didn't even glance my way. She was lost in her own dark thoughts. That silence was worse than any threat she could have given me. Moments later, the front door creaked open, followed by heavy footsteps echoing in the hall. David's voice rang out sharply. "She's not in the woods." Venessa didn't even flinch. "Don't worry," she replied calmly, almost too calmly. "She'll be back soon." She was lying. She knew I wasn't in the woods. I was right here, trapped like an animal. I wanted to scream, to bang the cage bars and yell David's name. But fear strangled me. What if he didn't believe me? What if he was still on her side? David's footsteps faded as he went upstairs to his room. My heart sank. Time crawled by until the night was thick and suffocating. I had no idea how many hours had passed when David returned. His voice carried down the hall, softer this time. "Venessa," he called. She glided toward him like a queen meeting her king. I shifted forward in my cage, straining to see. He handed her something small, wet, and glistening in the dim light. The moment Venessa's eyes fell on it, she gasped like a child seeing candy for the first time. A smile stretched across her face, wide and terrifying. "My darling," she purred, clutching the object to her chest. "You've outdone yourself tonight." She practically floated back into her room, humming as she moved. When she passed by me, I caught a glimpse of what she held and bile surged in my throat. A heart. A raw, still bleeding heart. Venessa licked her lips like she couldn't wait another second. Then, like a twisted parody of someone savoring dessert, she sank her teeth into it, closing her eyes in bliss. "Care for a bite, Juliya?" she teased, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. Then she threw her head back and let out a laugh, high, cold, and unhinged. I turned away, gagging, my stomach twisting in revulsion. I wanted to block out the sound, to erase the image from my mind, but I couldn't. Finally, after feasting, Venessa wiped her mouth and collapsed onto her luxurious bed. Within minutes, she was snoring softly, like nothing evil had just happened. I stared at her fragile-looking form and whispered to myself, "There has to be a way out." But no matter how hard I searched the room with my eyes, I found nothing, no key, no weapon, no hope. My body trembled with helplessness. The first rays of sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains when the door creaked open. I froze. David walked in. At first, I felt a surge of relief until I saw the flicker of calculation in his eyes. He stopped dead when he saw me in the cage. "Juliya, what the hell is this?" His voice was sharp, but there was no real shock in it. Venessa appeared behind him, her face serene. "I'm only keeping her here to make sure she doesn't plan anything foolish against us, David." David studied her for a long, tense moment. Then he turned to me, his face unreadable. "She stays," he said finally, his voice low and commanding. My breath caught in my throat. "What?" I shouted, tears burning my eyes. "David, please, you can't." But he didn't even glance at me. He just walked out, leaving my heart shattered. I crumpled to the floor, broken, so this was it. He had chosen Venessa over me, over everything. Hours later, when the house was quiet and Venessa had fallen into her afternoon nap, the door creaked again. David slipped inside silently, his face pale and tense. "Juliya," he whispered urgently, crouching by the cage. "Listen carefully." I glared at him through tear-streaked eyes. "Why? So you can break me even more?" "No," he said quickly, his voice cracking with sincerity. "You don't understand. I'm on your side. I have a plan." I stared at him, confused and wary. He leaned closer. "The hearts I've been giving Venessa for the last 2 nights, they're from female werewolves. They don't hold the same power for her. She thinks they do, but every time she consumes one, she grows weaker, day by day." My eyes widened. "So, you're poisoning her?" "Exactly," he said. A hint of grim satisfaction crossed his face. "When she's weak enough, I'll take her heart myself and end this nightmare." I was still processing his words when he continued, his voice trembling slightly now. "And there's more. Yesterday, I went into the secret room where I hide the bodies to keep the police from discovering them." His face twisted in pain as he spoke. "I found another hidden door inside. It led to a room I've never seen before, my mother's secret room." My breath caught. "There," he said, his voice breaking, "I found a letter. She warned me, Juliya. She wrote that Venessa was dangerous, that she'd try to manipulate me with promises of power and wealth. She said if I ever saw this letter, it meant Venessa had destroyed her." Tears welled up in my eyes. For the first time, I saw David not as a villain, but as a son who had been betrayed by the woman he trusted most. Before I could speak, he grabbed my hands through the bars. "I love you, Juliya. I love you, and I'm going to fix this. But I have to go now before Venessa suspects anything." And then he was gone, just like that. For the first time in days, a fragile thread of hope wound through my heart. David was with me. He wasn't just a monster, he was my husband, a man who loved me enough to risk everything. But I knew that hope wouldn't last. Not with Venessa in the same house, still powerful and still dangerous. 2 days later. Venessa's glamour was starting to crack. Her once youthful, perfect skin sagged slightly at the edges. Her sharp, dazzling eyes dulled with exhaustion. She complained of feeling tired, of aches she couldn't explain. Every night, David brought her a new heart, and every night she consumed it greedily, completely unaware that it was slowly killing her. I played my role well, trembling in fear, pretending to cower whenever she passed by my cage. "Such a fragile little thing," Venessa sneered one evening as she licked her bloody fingers. "So weak." Inside, though I wasn't weak, I was patient, waiting. Every glance, every word, every beat of her weakening pulse told me the same thing. Her time was running out. The morning sunlight crept weakly into Venessa's room, filtered through heavy velvet curtains. The air was cold, heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. Venessa stood in front of her ornate mirror, her hands trembling as she lifted the latest heart David had brought her. Its surface glistened dark red, almost black, as she sank her teeth into it. But this time, something was wrong. Her sharp eyes widened, and the confident smirk she always carried faltered. A shiver ran through her body, then a wave of pain twisted her face. She staggered backward, clutching her chest, gasping. What is this?" Venessa's voice was shrill, panicked. This isn't right." Her reflection in the mirror seemed to mock her as faint wrinkles began etching across her flawless skin. Her nails, usually long and sharp, cracked at the tips. "David!" she screamed, her voice rattling the whole mansion. Within seconds, David stormed into the room, his face blank but his eyes deadly serious. "What's happening, Venessa?" he asked calmly, though his voice held a dangerous edge. Venessa spun toward him, her cloak swirling like a storm cloud. "What's wrong with these hearts? I feel so weak, old." David crossed his arms, his jaw clenched. "Because they're female hearts." Venessa froze, stunned. "And," David added, his tone like a blade, "if you want another male heart, if you want to stay young and beautiful, you'll first free my wife." Venessa's lips curled back, baring her sharp, unnatural teeth. "Wow," she hissed. "You dare to blackmail me, David, the great ancient witch reduced to your bargaining chip." Her voice dripped venom. "Have you forgotten what I can do?" "Think twice, Venessa," David warned. "You need me. Without me, you're nothing but an old hag rotting in the dark." Venessa's laughter erupted, cold and furious, echoing through the room like a storm. "Why should I need you, David?" she snarled, her voice rising like a hurricane. "Why don't I just clear my path first? Then you won't love anyone except your precious power." David said, "You are already too weak, and if you do any magic then you will be even weaker." But Venessa didn't care. Before anyone could react, her hands shot up, glowing with dark magic. A violent burst of energy shot across the room, aimed directly at Juliya, who had been standing in the corner, frozen with terror. "No," David roared. In one swift motion, he threw himself between Juliya and Venessa's magic. The blast hit him square in the chest. "David!" I screamed, my voice breaking as I watched him crumple to the ground. The force of the spell shook the walls, rattling the floor beneath my feet. David gasped, clutching his chest, blood staining his lips. His body convulsed and his breaths grew ragged. Venessa's triumphant smirk vanished, her face twisted with horror. "No," she wailed. "David, you fool, why would you?" But it was too late. As David fell, a strange reaction surged through Venessa's body. The magic she had cast rebounded, stripping her of her strength. Her youthful face withered like dying flowers, her skin sagging, hair graying in seconds. As David said earlier that if a weak witch will do magic, then she will become even weaker, and it happened. Venessa became too weak even to walk. She screamed, clutching her head, her power draining faster than she could contain it. "No, this can't be." At that exact moment, the front doors burst open. The police stormed inside, Raven leading them. His wrists were free now, his expression blazing with fury. "Juliya!" Raven shouted, rushing to my side. "Raven!" I cried, my relief overwhelming. Behind him, the officers spread out, weapons drawn. "Alpha David, Venessa, stay where you are." Another police officer added, "Alpha, you are under arrest." But their eyes went wide when they saw David collapsed on the floor and Venessa, half monster and half woman, shrieking in the center of the room. David tried to lift his head, his voice barely a whisper. "Raven, good, you came back." Raven knelt by him, tears forming in his eyes. "I told them everything, David. They know now." David coughed, clutching his chest. "Good, because it's time for this to end." Venessa staggered to her feet, her face a grotesque mask of rage and desperation. "You think you can defeat me?" she shrieked, her voice inhuman. "I am older than this land. I have lived through centuries of kings and alphas. And they are finished," Raven cut her off, his voice steady. "The police raised their weapons, but I knew guns wouldn't kill her." The sound of guns were just a sound, nothing else, because Venessa didn't even flinch by bullets. Police officers got shocked. They stepped back. And I knew only one thing could, exactly what David had told me before. "Her heart," I whispered to Raven. "We have to destroy her heart." Venessa lunged forward with a final, desperate burst of magic, but she was too weak now, her power sputtering like a dying flame. Raven slammed into her, knocking her to the ground. "Juliya," he shouted, "now." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the sharp silver dagger one of the officers had dropped, my hands shaking but my resolve solid. Venessa clawed at me, her eyes wild. "You little worm, you think you can kill me?" "Yes," I snarled, rage and grief mixing inside me. "For everything you've done." With a cry, I drove the dagger deep into her chest. Venessa screamed, a sound so loud and unnatural it rattled every window in the house. Her body convulsed violently, then went completely still. When I pulled the dagger free, her form crumbled into ash and bone, scattering across the floor like dust in the wind. It was over. I collapsed to my knees, trembling, staring at the remains of the monster who had haunted my life. Then I heard a weak, rasping breath. "Juliya." I turned to see David lying on the floor, pale and broken. I rushed to him, cradling his head in my lap. "David, no, please stay with me." He lifted his hand, brushing a tear from my cheek with trembling fingers. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm a monster. I thought I was doing it for us, for power, for wealth, but all I did was destroy everything." Tears streamed down my face. "David, you're not a monster. You were manipulated. You." He silenced me with a weak shake of his head. "Tell me you forgive me." I sobbed, clutching his hand. "I forgive you, David. I love you." A faint, broken smile curved his lips. "I love you too." And then he was gone. His chest stilled, his hand slipping from mine. "No," I screamed, shaking him, but there was no response. Raven knelt beside me, his face etched with grief. The police stood silently in the doorway, the weight of what they'd witnessed pressing down on all of us. "It's over," Raven whispered, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. "Venessa is gone. No more blood, no more lies." But as I held David's lifeless body, my tears soaking his shirt, I realized the truth. It wasn't truly over. David had been both villain and victim. The man who had broken my heart, and the man who had saved it. And I would carry that pain forever. As dawn crept through the heavy clouds, the mansion stood in eerie silence, scarred by the battle we had barely survived. Broken windows gaped like open wounds, and the faint smell of magic and blood clung to the walls. I stood in the hall, my heart pounding, unsure if the nightmare was truly over. But the silence didn't last. Footsteps, voices. At first, it was David's pack members, trickling in one by one, their faces pale with confusion and fear. Then came others, the neighboring packs, storming out of the forest like a flood of rage. Their eyes glowed, some already half-shifted into wolf form. "Where is David?" One alpha growled, his voice echoing through the broken mansion. "Our half of the people are missing or may be dead. Someone will pay for this." The crowd erupted in angry snarls and shouts, and for a moment, I thought they would tear each other apart right there. Then Raven stepped forward. Even with chaos raging around us, he stood tall, shoulders squared, his usually playful face hardened with resolve. My breath caught. He wasn't the boyish cousin I'd met weeks ago. He looked like a leader now. "Listen to me," Raven's voice rang out like a whip crack. "David is gone. Venessa, the ancient witch, was behind this horror all along." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The name Venessa alone sent shivers down spines. I moved to stand beside him, though my legs trembled beneath me. I couldn't stay silent, not now. "It's true," I said, forcing strength into my voice. "Venessa destroyed everything. She manipulated David, twisted his mind. She's the one who consumed the hearts of your people, not Raven." They stared at me with wide, distrustful eyes. "Raven was innocent," I pressed on. "They used him as a scapegoat. They sent him into the forest so that if anyone saw him, they'd think he was the killer. And tell me one thing that people were missing even before, since Raven stepped into the city, am I right?" Raven nodded, his jaw tight. "David, he was guilty," he admitted, pain flickering across his face. "But he was her pawn. Venessa promised him power, and he gave her the hearts she craved. He built his empire on their deaths." The crowd murmured, shock and rage swirling together like a storm. I felt tears sting my eyes as I said, "David, he made terrible choices, but in the end, he saved me. He gave his life to stop her." The words nearly broke me, but they had to hear them. They had to know that, beneath the monster he became, David had still been a man capable of love. Raven led everyone to the secret room, the one I'd feared for so long. The heavy door groaned open, releasing a stench so foul it turned my stomach. Gasps and cries filled the hall as the truth spilled out before their eyes. Rows of bodies lay stacked inside. They weren't just bodies. They were lives stolen, friends and family stripped of their skins like trophies. I covered my mouth, choking back a sob, while some wolves fell to their knees in grief. Even the police, who had been skeptical until now, looked pale and shaken. One officer whispered, "Dear God, this is a massacre." Raven placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "It's over now," he murmured, his voice breaking. "They can finally rest." I nodded through my tears, though my heart felt like it was splintering into pieces. Later, after the packs dispersed and the house grew quiet again, I walked alone through the forest to a small clearing. There, beneath an ancient oak tree, David's grave waited. I knelt in the damp grass, my white dress soaking through, and placed a single white flower atop the fresh soil. My hands trembled as memories crashed over me like waves. The way David smiled at me on our wedding day. The night we spent on the beach, dancing under the stars. The moment he'd thrown himself between me and Venessa's deadly magic. I traced the outline of his name carved into the wooden marker. My throat burned as I whispered, "David, you were my nightmare and my dream." Tears blurred my vision until the world dissolved into nothing but grief. For a while, I stayed there, listening to the forest whisper around me, the cool morning breeze carrying my words to wherever his spirit might be. "I'll never forget you," I choked out. "Even after everything, even after all the pain, a part of me will always love you." Then, with a deep breath, I rose. Raven stood at the edge of the clearing, waiting for me. His silhouette was framed by the rising sun, steady and strong. As I walked toward him, my heart ached with the weight of everything we'd lost. He opened his arms, and I stepped into his embrace without hesitation. His warmth was a promise I desperately needed to believe in. "Everything will be all right," Raven whispered against my hair. I closed my eyes and clung to him,